Came into the newsroom within the last 2 hours. The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office says the human remains found yesterday do belong to the missing lotto winner Abraham Shakespeare. The big break in the case came earlier this week when a tipster told them to check out a home off East State Road 60 in Hillsborough County. When detectives arrived at that home, they started digging in nearby woods, and they finally zeroed in on a 30 by 30 foot concrete slab yesterday. They brought in heavy digging equipment, and after ripping apart that slab, they found Shakespeare's remains. An autopsy earlier today helped investigators confirm their suspicions in this case. And the home where the remains were found is owned by Shar Kresnicki. He is the boyfriend of the main person of interest in this investigation, Dee Moore. Detectives say Moore is a friend of Shakespeare's, and they say she conned the 47-year-old man out of millions of dollars over the last couple of years. We have more late-breaking developments on this case coming up tonight at 5.
Cold, calculated, cruel, they all apply. Manipulative, probably the most manipulative person that this court has seen. Abraham Shakespeare was your prey and your victim. Money was the root of the evil that you brought to Abraham.
The numbers came in at 11 on a Wednesday night. 6, 1, 13, H, 42, Z. Abraham Shakespeare was sitting at home in Lakeland, Florida when he checked his ticket. He checked it again. He called his mother. He didn't sleep that night. He was 40 years old, barely literate, had $5 to his name when he bought those tickets, and had just won $30 million. 3 years later, he was dead. Shot twice in the chest, buried under a concrete slab in someone's backyard. And the woman who put him there had moved into his house, was driving his car, and was texting his family from his phone, pretending to be him. She said she wanted to write a book about his life. What she actually wanted was everything he had, and she took it. Every last dollar. Then she took him.
A warning to our viewers. What you are about to watch is a true story. The following program contains content that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Welcome to Dark Motive Crimes. Before we go any further, if you're new here, this channel exists for one reason: to make sure that people like Abraham Shakespeare are never reduced to a headline about a lottery ticket. If that matters to you, subscribe now, because what comes next is the part the news never tells you. Now, let's go back to Lakeland. Before we talk about the money, before we talk about what the money brought through his front door, you need to know who Abraham Shakespeare was. Not the lottery winner. The man. Abraham Lee Shakespeare was born on April 24th, 1966, in Lakeland, Florida, into a household held together by hard work and not much else. His parents were orange pickers.
Abraham quit school after 6th grade, not because he didn't care, but because there were people who needed him to work. He was that kind of person from the very beginning. He cleaned floors at a barber shop on Highway 98 North. He rode shotgun on overnight food delivery trucks. He swept, he unloaded, he showed up. Whatever the job was, he did it without complaint and without asking anyone to notice. His friend Greg Smith, who ran the barber shop where Abraham worked, described him simply: quiet, easygoing, unremarkable to look at, harmless. The kind of man who never hurt anyone, never raised his voice, never needed to be the most important person in the room. He had 2 sons, Moses, born in 2001, and Jeremiah, born in 2008. He was behind on child support before the win. He was working on it. That's who he was. A man working on it. The way most people in Lakeland were working on it. One shift at a time. On the night of November 15th, 2006, Abraham and his coworker Michael Ford were making an overnight meat delivery run to Miami
for a food distribution company called MBM Corporation. Ford was at the wheel. They stopped at the Town Star convenience store in Frostproof, Florida. Ford got out for sodas and cigarettes. Abraham shouted after him, "Get me 2 quick picks." He handed Ford 2 of the $5 he had to his name. The numbers drawn that night were 6, 12, 13, 34, 42, and 52. Abraham Shakespeare had won $31 million. He chose the lump sum, $17 million before taxes, roughly $11 million in hand. He moved from his working-class neighborhood into a gated community called Red Hawk Bend in North Lakeland. He bought a Rolex, he bought a Nissan Altima, and then he did something that made him beloved in Lakeland and would ultimately make him a target. He gave it away. Mortgages paid off, car repossessions stopped, groceries bought for strangers. Friends who owed money found their debts quietly forgiven. His friend Greg Smith said it plainly. When Abraham won that money, it wasn't only Abraham Shakespeare. It was the community that won the lottery. People came to his door constantly. Some he knew, many he didn't. They had stories, a mother's funeral, an eviction notice, a child's medical bill. Abraham Shakespeare, barely literate, a man who had never had anything, could not say no. He did not know how. It was simply not in him. Within a year and a half, most of the money was gone. He said to Greg Smith one afternoon, quietly, the way he said most things, "I thought all these people were my friends. But then I realized all they want is just money." He was right. He just didn't know yet how much more there was still to take. Before we bring Dee Dee Moore into Abraham's story, you need to understand something important. She did not become a predator the day she heard his name. Doris Donegan Moore was born on July 25th, 1972, in Tampa, Florida. She married a man named James Moore in 1992. They had a son together in 1995. On the surface, a normal life. A family, a business, a woman building something. But the paper trail underneath that surface tells a different story entirely. In 2000, Dee Dee purchased a $50,000 Lincoln Navigator. On the finance documents, she listed her income as $10,000 a month from a sales job and $30,000 a year selling Mary Kay cosmetics. She fell behind on payments almost immediately. When the credit union came calling, she told a loan officer that her money had been stolen. She never provided a police report. She avoided repossession by scraping together just enough to keep them quiet. The following year, she went further. In 2001, Dee Dee Moore filed an insurance fraud claim for $60,000, telling authorities her car had been stolen and that she herself had been abducted and assaulted. It was a fabrication. She was convicted of insurance fraud and falsely reporting a crime. She received 1 year of probation. In 2002, the year after her criminal conviction, she filed for bankruptcy. By 2008, she had rebuilt her image carefully. She now presented herself as the owner of American Medical Professionals, LLC, a nursing staffing agency based in Plant City, Florida. Sharp, polished, credible. The kind of woman you'd trust with paperwork. Court records would later reveal that the agency's business checking account was being used primarily for her own personal expenses. That the business, like so much else in Dee Dee Moore's life, was less an enterprise than a costume. She told investigators during the Shakespeare case that she had been a millionaire before she ever met Abraham. Her bank records said otherwise. This is who Dee Dee Moore was before she walked through Abraham Shakespeare's door. Not an opportunist who stumbled onto a lottery winner and improvised. A practiced, patient, decade-long fraudster who had been running variations of the same con, false claims, fabricated wealth, other people's money, since at least the year 2000. Abraham Shakespeare was not her first scheme. He was just the largest target she had ever found. In October 2008, Dee Dee Moore reached out to Abraham through his realtor. She went by Dee Dee. She was in her mid-30s, sharp, well-dressed, and immediately convincing. She told Abraham she wanted to write a book about his life, the rags-to-riches story of a man who had come from nothing and won everything. It was a compelling pitch, and Abraham Shakespeare, a man who had spent his whole life being invisible, was flattered by it. He let her in. What Dee Dee Moore actually wanted had nothing to do with a book. Within months of entering his life, she had inserted herself into his finances. In February 2009, she created a company called Abraham Shakespeare LLC, registered herself as the sole signatory on the bank account, and had him sign over control of what remained. What remained of his money? She became, in every practical sense, his financial manager, except that no money was being managed. It was being moved into her accounts, her properties, her vehicles, her life. She bought herself a Hummer, a Corvette, a truck. She took vacations. She transferred funds from the Abraham Shakespeare LLC account directly into American Medical Professionals, her own company, and used it to purchase a $253,000 property in Plant City, titled in her boyfriend's name. She told anyone who asked that Abraham had gifted it all to her freely. By early 2009, Abraham Shakespeare had almost nothing left. Investigators would later establish that by the time she was done, he had approximately $14,000 remaining from $17 million. And he had realized something was wrong. According to prosecutors, he had begun asking questions, the kind of questions that made Dee Dee Moore understand he was becoming a problem. On April 6th, 2009, Abraham Shakespeare was seen for the last time. He was 42 years old. For months, nobody outside Abraham's immediate circle knew he was missing. Dee Dee Moore filled the silence methodically. She moved into Abraham's $1 million home in North Lakeland. She drove his car. She kept his phone and used it to text his friends and family, typing messages in his name, telling people he was fine, that he had gone away, that he needed space. From the people who had been taking from him for years. The story was almost believable, because the irony of it was, Abraham had been trying to escape exactly that for years. People who knew him could just about picture him quietly vanishing somewhere warm. In November 2009, Abraham's family officially reported him missing. Detectives from the Polk County Sheriff's Office began looking at Dee Dee Moore almost immediately. She had control of his money. She was living in his house. Her explanations shifted with every conversation. He had gone to Orlando, he had a new girlfriend, he had gotten into drug trouble and gone into hiding. Each story contradicted the last. Then in December 2009, Abraham's mother, Elizabeth Walker, received a phone call from her son. She was relieved for exactly as long as it took her to realize something was wrong. The voice was off, not quite right in a way she could name, but could feel immediately, the way a mother feels it. She called police. Detectives traced the call. It had not come from Abraham Shakespeare. It had come from a man named Greg Smith, Abraham's friend and former barbershop employer, using a payphone at a crowded shopping mall. They watched the mall parking lot and saw Moore pass something to Smith. When they brought him in, Smith told them everything. Dee Dee Moore had paid him to make the call, to play Abraham, to give Elizabeth Walker just enough to stop asking questions. Smith owed Abraham $63,000. Moore had promised to forgive the debt if he helped her keep the lid on. He agreed to wear a wire instead. What followed over the next weeks was one of the most extraordinary undercover operations in the case's history. Greg Smith kept a Red Bull can on the table every time he met with Moore. Inside the can, he had built a recording device himself. 9 hours of conversation caught inside a drink can across multiple meetings. The recordings are remarkable. Moore is heard directing Smith with a precision that suggests she had been thinking about this for a long time. She handed him a .38 caliber handgun, the weapon used to kill Abraham Shakespeare. She gave instructions on how to file down the serial number. She reminded him to wipe her fingerprints off the battery in the laser sight. Then she took him to the backyard of a property she owned in Plant City, a rural town east of Tampa. She gave him a shovel. She drew him a diagram showing how to dig at an angle under the concrete slab, then go straight down. Abraham Shakespeare had been there the whole time, buried 5 feet deep, under concrete, on land Dee Dee Moore had purchased with his money. She also brought a cattle trough to the property and told Smith they should pour kerosene into it. She wanted to burn what was left of him. Police moved before she could. On January 26, 2010, investigators excavated the backyard in Plant City. They found Abraham Shakespeare's mummified remains exactly where the recordings said he would be. 2 bullet wounds to the chest. Buried under a concrete slab on land paid for with his own lottery winnings. He had been dead since April 2009. 9 months in the ground, while Dee Dee Moore lived in his house, drove his car, and sent texts to his mother from his phone. Doris Moore was arrested on February 2nd, 2010, and charged with first-degree murder. During the investigation, something else emerged that is worth sitting with. Abraham Shakespeare's phone records showed that from the day he disappeared, his phone had only sent messages to one person, Dee Dee Moore. And the cell towers that his phone and her phone pinged off were identical. The same towers, the same locations, the same timestamps every day from April 2009 onward. She had his phone. She had been carrying it alongside her own phone every single day, walking around Lakeland with a dead man's number in her pocket. There was also the matter of the online investigation. A true crime forum called Web Sleuths had been actively working the case for months before the body was found. Forum members compiled timelines, cross-referenced public records, flagged inconsistencies in Moore's story, and sent their findings to the detectives working the case. The lead investigator on the case later said publicly that the Web Sleuths forum had been instrumental. Most detectives would not acknowledge that kind of debt. He did. Abraham Shakespeare's case, a man that most of the world had already reduced to a lottery ticket punchline, was partly solved by strangers on the internet who thought he deserved better than to stay missing. The trial of Doris Moore opened in late 2012 in Hillsborough County Circuit Court. The 9 hours of Red Bull can recordings were played in full. Jurors heard Moore's voice, giving instructions, describing the grave,
handing over the weapon, talking through how to make sure the body was never found. The defense did not call a single witness. More declined to testify. The jury deliberated for just over 3 hours. Guilty. First-degree murder. Possession and discharge of a firearm resulting in death. Judge Emmett Battles addressed Moore directly before sentencing. Abraham Shakespeare was your prey and victim. Money was the root of evil you brought to Abraham. He sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She has appealed multiple times since. In 2023, she claimed corrupt investigators had been bribed by drug dealers connected to Shakespeare. The investigators denied it. The judge denied the appeal. In interviews from prison, Moore still maintains she did not kill him. There was no reason for him to pass away over money, she told ABC News.
What was left of Abraham Shakespeare's estate was barely enough to fight over. The house, a Corvette, a Silverado, a few remaining assets, all purchased by Dee Moore with money she had taken from him while he was still alive. An attorney petitioned in 2010 for those assets to be returned to Abraham's estate for his sons, Moses and Jeremiah. Jeremiah was 1 year old when his father was murdered. Moses was 8. Their father had been so generous with $17 million that by the time Dee Moore found him, there was barely anything left for the people he had actually loved. His friend Greg Smith put it simply, sitting in that barber shop on Highway 98 North, where Abraham had swept floors and showed up every day and never asked for anything from anyone. When Abraham first won that money, it wasn't only Abraham Shakespeare. It was the community won the lottery. And the community took it. Almost all of it. One story at a time. One outstretched hand at a time. Until a woman who had been running cons since the year 2000, who had filed false insurance claims, faked a kidnapping, gone bankrupt, and rebuilt her image behind a nursing agency that was barely more than a letterhead, walked through his door with a book deal that never existed. She took whatever was left of his money. Then she took him. Abraham Lee Shakespeare was 42 years old. He had quit school at 6th grade to feed his family. He had worked overnight meat routes and swept barbershop floors and showed up, always showed up, for a life that had never once made it easy. He had $5 to his name on the night he bought 2
Quick Picks at a convenience store in Frostproof. He won $31 million and spent 3 years giving it to people who needed it. He died because of it. His name deserves to be said properly, not as a cautionary tale about lottery winners, not as a punchline, as a man, quiet, generous, deeply human, who was hunted by someone who saw only what he was worth and nothing of who he was. Rest easy, Abraham. If this story stayed with you, and it should, share it. Abraham Shakespeare's name has been attached to a lottery ticket for too long. He deserves to be remembered as a person. And if you want to be here when we tell the next story that deserves to be told properly, subscribe. Every case on this channel is someone's father, someone's friend, someone's whole world.